where did the wisdom come from? Was it just iterative mistake after mistake and learning from those? Or was there something else that sort of led you down a pathway of building better, stronger?
I do love the Tao Te Ching. I believe entrepreneurship is a spiritual journey at its core. I always think of the infinity symbol because it's a tension between two worlds that has to be maintained. If there's slack in the tension between creativity and operations, disruption occurs, there's challenge, obstacles happen. If the tension's too tight, you can break it. The best campaigns we've ever done to date were the least expensive for the output. Whenever we had big budgets versus the ones that were off the cusp and smaller budgets, always the smaller budgets perform better. They're also always more creative.
Do you be right or do you get the result?
You get the result.
If you're new here, welcome. I'm excited that you've joined us. Every single week, I get to sit down with CEOs, leaders, founders, builders who are doing something really fantastic on the planet. They're building a business that's making a difference in other people's lives. And I get the opportunity to sit down and chat with them and learn how they're doing it, the lessons, the failures, the opportunities, and they're going to leave you and me every single week with some nugget, mini nuggets actually, that you can integrate, implement into your business to do the same thing. So I'm glad you're here. Sit back, let's get into it.
Most founders think that business is all strategy, and it really is. There's a lot of pieces, and you and I were just talking about this a second ago, that strategy is one of the critical aspects of building your business. But there's also many other elements like positioning and messaging and, of course, marketing, and all those things matter. But what I don't think a lot of people really consider, and what we're going to talk about today with my guest, a lot of people don't really think about strategy being a direct connection with how you actually think about things, how you philosophize about things, like your beliefs about things, right? What's your tolerance for risk and how much control do you need? And what are you afraid of to let go? And I was literally just having this conversation with another entrepreneur today. She's like, I'm terrified of letting go of things. So it's really kind of interesting because all of those things that you bring to your business, they're all personal development models, whether it's context, whether it's learned behavior, they all sort of show up in how you run your business because your life and your business are directly connected, right? So one of the things that I want to get in today on this podcast is something that I see constantly with people, and my guest and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago in the green room, is how do you actually build a business? How do you actually build a brand creatively without turning everything into chaos, right? And at the same time, you have to have systems, you have to have functions, you have to have foundations, but you still want at the core, the through line of everything you do, still you want to have creativity, right? And what happens is if you try to overcorrect with systems or overcorrect with creativity, you sort of lose that balance, right? And my guest today is sort of figure out how to manage that tension, or at least so that's what we're hoping, because I want to learn from him, right? So let me talk about my guest, and I'm just going to sort of introduce his press kit here. As I do with all of my guests, I write something out. I'm going to read this, not going to shoot from my hip, because this guy has a lot of accomplishments and a lot of bio information that needs to be heard. So my guest today is Latif Hamilton. He is a creative entrepreneur. He is the founder of Spirithoods, and he's now the force behind the Growth Operative. Over the last 15 years, this cat has built one of the more recognizable lifestyle brands in the nightlife and event space. And something that was really cool when I first learned about it, it started off as a wild idea like most entrepreneurs, right, with friends. And then he turned this thing into a multi-million-dollar company doing over $50 million in revenue. Those are things that we can all dream about, right? And he has partnerships with global brands. He has appearances on Shark Tank, CNBC. The dude has the whole thing put together. I think what I am most excited about Latif, it's not just what he's built, although that's fascinating. It's really how he has continued to evolve through all of the building of this. And he's been through the side of entrepreneurship that people don't really talk about. It's the things that really sort of matter the most if you sort of break it all down. It's how do you operate under pressure where you're still trying to figure out everything in real time. And in some cases, things don't work, at least on the surface, but you still have to continue plugging away, right? So instead of just staying in the brand, he has now stepped into helping other founders think differently about how they build, how they connect creatively with actual structure, and how they turn ideas into something that scales, and how they don't lose themselves in the process. So, my man, welcome to the lab. Good to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure always to connect.
Yeah. So before we actually get into it, I just introduced you with my sort of introduction on you. Tell me, who are you? What are you doing right now? 30 seconds. What's your 30-second elevator pitch to my audience?
Yeah. So I'm still working on Spirithoods, always grinding. I feel like that's it's fun. I get to treat it as a case study. we're constantly evolving and shape shifting in fashion, especially with the world today with the tariffs and
Mm.
the oil prices spiking and war and you name it. We're in a shifting climate that is a little challenging. It's a little stressful at times. And then I also have the Growth Operative, which is where we do consulting contracts and work for various brand partners. We originally were working with fashion, but it quickly spiraled out into just general e-commerce because all of the principles still apply everywhere. At the end of the day, a widget is kind of a widget for the most part, and so we end up working with brands from in the nutrition space to apps to you name it, which has been really fun. And then I've just been doing things like Substack and educating and exploring, teaching on a wider scale, just because I'm really passionate about that. So I've been kind of evolving into that space and at the same time running and cruising around with Spirithoods.
I'm a little disappointed that I don't actually have one of your hoods on right now while I'm doing this podcast. I expected to see one in the mail. I'm
Listen, I
surprised
got
that.
you. You know what? You are absolutely right. We dropped the ball on that one. You got it. You tell me what you want and we'll send it over.
I am going to hold you to that. That's
Please.
funny. You just said something earlier about sort of like distribution channels, and I was just reading about if this ridiculous war, we'll call it a war, if this ridiculous situation
Yeah.
continues, like all the different impact it's going to have on gasoline and just like
Well, the
different.
impact's already happened. It's
Yeah,
already happened. My prices are going up. Petroleum is in everything.
yeah,
So everything will go up. Transportation will go up. It's going to go up. Maybe it'll be shorter term if we can resolve the situation that we kind of started,
yeah.
that we very much started. So
I was going to say no,
um,
kind
yeah,
of. We
yeah, not
started at
kind of. Yeah,
100%,
we definitely started it. I think
which is
I don't want
often
to.
the case.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
Sorry.
want to get into the politics. I got so many, I think that can get us all a little bit fired up. But I mean, the reality of it is that we're knee deep in something, and
Hmm.
it has already impacted,
Yeah.
us in a wide variety of ways that we have yet to see. But it is coming, and
Hmm.
even now, in my last order placement, for my product, all of my material inputs have gone up as a direct byproduct of this attack.
Ridiculous. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I won't go into politics. I'd love to riff with you offline about it because it's just lunacy. But
Let's do it.
you said something right before we jumped into this. You said a widget is a widget at the end of the day. Do you truly think that? And I'm curious. Like
Well,
so hold on. So uh, uh, in terms of like building a business, a widget is a
hmm
widget. So I
hmm
guess my question is, if you had to fundamentally take a look at not from a myopic point of view, but building a business, building an e-commerce business, building a platform, building a branding agency, there are inherent qualities when you said a widget is a widget
yeah,
that go
yeah.
into every business build. From your perspective, what are those inherent qualities? I'm curious to hear that.
Yeah, I mean the fundamentals, right? I think the fundamentals I like to separate between service-based businesses and e-com or product-based businesses. And I'm really an e-com specialist, so when it comes to product-based business, there is always creative fundamentals.
Hmm.
How you focus on building awareness, trust, etc. Those are things that always have to be done across the
Hmm.
board, whether you're selling a chair or I don't know, a bag of chips, there's still the fundamentals there, right? Faux for coat, for example. Why are you going to buy, right? Educational content. And also, I just wrote an article on this the other day on my Substack, but it's the educational content and the entertainment content from a creative lens that are really, really instrumental, right? And we kind of differentiate between those two, and they serve different purposes.
Hmm.
And any brand can apply these sort of basic principles. When you're building something, you also have your same, sure, is there different financial modeling? Absolutely. Is there different customer service modeling? Absolutely. But you still have to have all those, and they still generally follow similar protocols. Like my customer service for my wholesale accounts still treats them with excellence, just like they treat our ecom direct to consumer customers. Right? There's still a quality control element there. There's still so I think fundamentally, you're separating the creative and operations, and that's what you were talking about earlier. That I like. I always think of an infinity symbol
Hmm.
because it's a tension between two worlds that has to be maintained. If there's slack in the tension between creativity and operations, right? If
Hmm.
there's slack there, disruption occurs, there's challenge, obstacles happen. If the tension's too tight, you can break it. right? There's too much tension. So you want this sort of perfect balance of tension oscillating in where your focus is. If you kind of draw that infinity loop, you're oscillating between your, especially as an individual entrepreneur. Do you know what I mean? Like when
I
you're out
do.
here, you don't have a ton of stuff, you don't got a ton of money, ton of staff. Even if you have a reasonable amount of money, the best campaigns we've ever done to date were the least expensive for
Mm,
the output, right? Whenever we had big budgets versus the ones that were off the cusp and smaller budgets, always the smaller budgets perform better. They're also always more creative.
mm,
Somehow money can sort of course, you can take money and make it extremely creative. But what I'm saying is there's an authenticity that comes along with being shortchanged and in terms of finances. And I think that that's okay, especially in the beginning. Whereas you can blow through a bunch of money if you don't have enough experience in
mm,
creating something creative. So, but that fundamental balance of tension between operations and creativity is really important. A lot of people will lean way too heavy in one side or the other, and they'll wonder why something's not working out. You know what I mean?
mm,
If you're too operational heavy, you're too structured, you're too rigid, you're not creating or producing things that people laugh at or are entertained by or creatively stimulated by or, as you know, visually inspired by, right? And if you're too heavy in creativity, you often don't bring things to the world. You stay stuck in a place that is either so aspirational or not grounded in reality that the production costs are too expensive or you name it, right? The creative world it needs to be grounded back into operations. And that's the difference even between artistry, right? Artists design or create for the sake of art, right? Not for other people. Creatives are creative and arguably equally creative, but they create within a container. And that container is kind of the operational world. It's the
mhm.
fencing of that operational world.
That's
So
interesting that you say that sort of the simplicity model. I have a good analogy for that. I own a photography studio, and for many years before I got into branding, I was very heavy into photography, and I've shot weddings and people all over the world. And I was sort of reflecting on this recently because I just finished doing a brand shoot for a client, and I was not heavily involved in the shooting and whatnot. But I was thinking back to, just 10 years ago when I would have showed up at a business for a brand shoot and I bring all these lights and all these
mhm.
reflectors and all these different things. And today I basically have like a 3 or 4 piece kit that I would show up because
Yep.
I've just realized that over time, my skills have gotten a lot better and I'm able to sort
Yep.
of observe light and things like that much easier. But just the simplification of the kit itself enabled me to sort of be more robust and more sort of present with the shoot itself rather than trying to like constantly fidget with all these
Yeah.
equipment. And it's a pretty interesting model because I do think, especially as business owners, we always think that we have to keep things always innovative and always, and we do
Hmm.
to an extent, but in our attempt to innovate, we also sometimes overcomplicate. So,
Hmm.
and that's kind of what you just said. At least that's a thread that I heard
Yeah.
in building your first business. And I think I saw the $50 million revenue. Where were
Hmm.
some of the things when you look back? Where was that balance between the tension and the creativity and sort of the simplification of it so that you were able to continue being robust and adding
Hmm.
value, but not overcomplicating the situation?
Yeah. And actually, Spirithoods is my second business. Just to be clear, I had a business before that that was in residential and commercial remodeling. But I would say, as it relates to Spirithoods, the balance was all over the place. I mean, I have to say we had other partners, right? I had other partners for the longest time, and at some point, I had three partners. I had a finance partner that came in and then came out. We lost partners, we exited partners. So the balance was all over the place. And I think
Mm,
this is another component that is really important. Uh, who's on your team is really important
sure.
because if there's not a fit, I mean, if a team member or an organizational partner, a business partner is talented or great in a lot of ways, but there's not a synergy between you, there can be that balance of tension that there's not a balance. It's ripping, like the tension is too tight,
Mm,
right? You can cut the room with a knife at times,
mm,
so to speak, or at least the organization. There's two, and also from a leadership standpoint, a lot of times the team that is now working underneath you has trouble getting clear directives. And so for us, we botch that whole process. And I think as an entrepreneur, you're going to do that. You know what I mean? Like you need to do that
more than
uh,
once.
more than once, yeah,
Yeah.
and on a daily sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to give yourself room to find it, and each person in each company has its own metrics for success in that. But I will say, you want to try to have a 50-50 sort of balance. If you are holding an operational position, then you want your partner to hold a creative position.
Hmm.
You want to balance the tensions, and you absolutely, one of the things about modern society is that the social media algorithms and all the things that we have out there cater to our own perspective, and that is a huge problem in life and in entrepreneurial worlds. Because if you have people just telling you what a like-minded perspective is, it's going to cause you a lot of challenge as you move forward, because you need somebody with an opposing view, if not to go along with their view necessarily, but to alter your primary perspective so that it accommodates another position, another view, and it expands your customer base. It expands the opportunity, and it expands the idea. And so, Republicans and Democrats and all these different, we need the opposing forces. You cannot not have them. And so to not respect the opposing force is really where we come into problems,
Mm.
right? Where we feel threatened, as though it's gonna ruin our creativity, or the business guy is gonna ruin our creativity, et cetera, right? And yes, that can happen, but it is wildly important to have differing perspectives. And I think that was a great shift for me in understanding how to balance the tensions, because toward the last, maybe about 5-6 years ago, we had a finance partner, and he really was not, he really wanted to be creative, which sometimes happens when we get an operational or finance partner in the company. But his skill was in finances and operations and
Mm.
some of these logistical things. And I learned a lot about putting my own creative desires in check in a way that would better serve both my audience and my wallet,
Mm.
our pocketbook, and our growth strategy. And so, he really helped me. Did we get along often? We got along a reasonable amount of time. We also didn't get along in areas. We also were arguing at times. And as I look back today, I'm 100% grateful for his perspective. And we're still friends to this day. But again, yeah, I think it took me a while to
Mm.
long story short, it took me a while to figure out the balance of tensions.
You sound like Lao Tzu, Latif dropping some Lao
Hey,
Tzu
he is
with,
one of my
the
favorites.
duality over here. I love it.
Yes. Yes.
That's funny you said that. I was just reading Scottie Pippen. He has a book out, and he's reading.
Okay.
I was just reading how he and Jordan actually didn't like each other as
Ah,
humans, but they were arguably the best 1-2 combo in NBA basketball history. Some would argue,
wow.
right? So,
Yeah.
and he's sort of like, we see each other now, and we obviously we're friends, and we've spent 15 years together on the court, but they actually didn't like each other in as
And that
human
makes a lot of
beings.
sense. And
Yeah.
and and you don't entirely have to, but you do need to respect each other.
Yeah. And what he said, which is kind of going back to your point, he said, the thing that made us so great is that we held each other accountable, and
Mhm.
and everyone on the team, you talked about structure and team. He's like, everybody on the team had a very specific role, and nobody ever deviated from that role in terms of trying to be someone else's role, only
Mhm.
when it was necessary, right? So it was really kind of cool that
Right.
you said that. In terms of this whole idea of structure, like, it's interesting because it sounds like you have a team, right? There's a
Mhm.
lot of people who listen to this podcast, and I was one for many years. I have a small team now, but I was a solopreneur for many years, right? And so you don't
Mhm.
have the opportunity to necessarily have opposing duality thoughts to hold you accountable in some of
Yeah.
the things you do, right? But
Yeah.
there are other ways to go about that, right?
There
Collaborative
is.
partners, hiring
Mhm.
a coach, whatever, surrounding yourself with
Mhm.
mentors, whatever it is. So in your early development as an entrepreneur, I guess, where did the wisdom come from? How did you sort of, was it just iterative mistake after mistake and learning from those, or was there something else that sort of led you down a pathway of building better, stronger?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do love the Tao Te Ching, actually, and
Hmm.
and I think there's a lot of wisdom out there. I believe entrepreneurship is a spiritual journey at its core.
Sure.
Without getting fluffy here, you cannot evolve as a human being. So, entrepreneurship is a fast track in a lot of ways. I think because you are faced with many obstacles,
Mm.
and I think it is an iterative process. As you go along, you notice that how you're headstrong.
Mm.
You notice what areas you need to work on, and you learn how to also delegate better and how to listen to your team. I think a core necessity, if you want to be an entrepreneur, is to be able to listen, not just to your team, but what is your audience? You're
Mm.
saying, how do we get that wisdom? How do we get that alternative perspective? There's a lot of ways. And another key thing about entrepreneurship is that about being an entrepreneur is that everyone has a perspective, right? And so having the discernment to know whose perspective matters in what area of your life or
Mm.
your company is really, really important, because you don't want to take everyone's opinions and do them, but you do want to take everyone's opinions, listen, and figure out if there's any truth in it or if there isn't, and make your decisions. And so for me, one of my favorite things to do is to be out with my customers but they have no idea who I am. I just look like I might just be a worker, right? So when we were at festivals early on, we have these booths and we would sell tons of product at these festivals. And I would get a huge sense of what our festival customer was like. Now, that's only one small portion of our customer base. Then I would go and I would meet celebrities, and I would get their experience through these networks that I had. And I would come to understand what it was like for them wearing the coat, and what they loved about it, and what they appreciated, what they didn't like, and what they wanted to see. When it came to business, obviously, I was blessed with partners that we really differentiated in a lot of ways. We really had differing opinions on things, which was early on. As a young male, we were all young males. We were definitely a little more,
Mm.
clashing together at times. So there is a smoother way to go about doing that. And I think mediators and different people being involved in your company, transparency, and again, rounding out your perspective is one of the greatest things you can do. So don't shield yourself or your ideas from getting torn apart by other people that you may respect, even that are in different industries. And
Mm.
then again, you got to develop discernment on whether or not you think that person's information is valid or not. You're not. I think attachment is one of the biggest challenges. We get really attached to our companies. You've spoken about this. We
Mm-hmm.
get really attached to our companies. We get really attached to things. Like you said earlier, it's hard to let go. It's hard to pivot. That's because we get so attached to things and we put the I
Mm-hmm.
in there. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the greatest ways in which I've been able to get greater perspective is by always saying we. I have a tendency to predominantly say we. My designs are a we.
I love
They are a
that.
team. The team is involved. Our marketing is a we.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter that I may be leading various things. There's always more than me behind something.
Mm.
And so when I start putting the we there, it changes my perspective. It lowers my ego that is
Mm.
involved or wants to get involved, and it gives me the ability to almost look at the company from that perspective that it's not even mine,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I love that we I space. I actually I just hired a new employee and she started calling me boss. And I kind of lightly reprimanded her. I was like, don't call me a boss. I don't like the term, first of all. Just like
Yeah.
this is where we are all building an organization here.
Yes.
And maybe I'm the boss some days, but you're actually running the podcast. So I actually technically work for you and I want you to give me direction on it. So,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So I love that you said that.
Yeah.
I want to go
Yeah.
back to something, listening to your customers is really important. I went to this mastermind workshop a couple of weeks ago, and there was a pretty high level speaker who was presenting, and he was sort of trolling the audience, asking them a little bit about how do they sort of enhance their customer service experience and all these sorts of things. And everybody sort of had these different answers, and people were like, you got to look at the algorithm, you got to look at your data, and all those things are really accurate. But it was kind of funny because he turned around and he said, how many of you have ever stopped and actually just interviewed your customers? And I was like, yeah, man, like
Mhm.
how often do we focus on all the data, but how often do we actually go to the trenches like you did, get in the
Yeah.
festival, engage with your people? Like how
Mhm.
often do we actually ask our customers, are we doing a good job? Is there something we could be doing differently?
Mhm.
And I ask for reviews and I ask for testimonials, but it really is a good reminder to just get in the trenches with your customers. Pick up the
Yep.
phone call, have a couple of phone calls with some people, and be like, what
100%.
could we have done better today? Where did we shine? Where did we not so much shine? Like, what are the things? And getting feedback. It's like, it's basic tenet, but like it's fundamental to running a business, right?
And it builds huge customer loyalty. I mean, to
Mm-hmm.
get a phone call from the owner or the founder, no matter the size of the business, is
Mm-hmm.
is awesome
Yeah.
for somebody, or an email, So yeah, and my favorite is one on like face to face, like when you get
Mm-hmm.
out there and you're doing a booth, or you're doing something. I think that's one of the most powerful ways to just understand your customer and what they're looking for. We do post-purchase surveys. We're always mixing it up. We're always asking various questions. We recently just asked what kind of content people wanted to see from us, and on Spirithoods, on the Spirited side, not the Growth
Hmm.
Operative. And they no surprise here, but they wanted more outfit and styling
Hmm.
content. And I have just been, inundated and not been pumping out much styling content for our customers, and that was the number one thing they wanted. So
Hmm.
here I am, maybe producing content that's on number three on priority, or number four, or number two, and I'm not really pumping out the number one requested content. So I mean these are important things, and I think we can easily get lost in the woods of our own company. And you need perspective. You need to be connected.
Yeah,
Right?
I actually did a post on this a couple of weeks ago on sort of how we tend to get myopic on our own point of view because we're
Yeah.
just in it all day long. And there's just so much, I hate to say it, but almost like homogeneity around the fact that we're just so focused on building something that we have these blinders
Hmm.
on, and we're not
Hmm.
able to sort of look around at all the different pieces of the puzzle that also may add
Hmm.
value. It's an
Hmm.
interesting perspective. So, how does one stay sort of nimble around a product? You said you're getting feedback from your customers and whatnot, but as you build a business, how do you
Hmm.
sort of stay self-aware around more of the holistic perspective of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of ways. If we talk about product development for a second, versus the entirety,
Mhm.
um, I think that sheds light. I mean, ultimately, what we're trying to do in business is retain customers and find new ones,
Mhm.
right? There's the residual customer, there's net new acquisition, and there's two methodologies to going about that. One of them, as we discussed, was sort of mining your existing audience and designing products that cater to that audience. And then the next level is, okay, how, yes, we can take that exact model and try to feed it into like-minded marketing systems, or you know, events, or wherever we can go that is a like-minded customer. But then what about the net new acquisition? What about expanding beyond that? What about new product development, new colorways, or this or that, right? And then this comes down to mining for what people are searching for in Google search, for
Mm.
example, figuring out what are people looking for that you have yet to tap into, that is a very similar um, you know product to what you're already doing. So, for example, we do black faux fur coats, and I'm getting a lot of searches. I find that a lot of people are searching for yellow faux fur coats, and there's not a ton of people taking advantage of that. There's not a lot of businesses that have a bunch of yellow faux fur coats. I might dive into that a little bit more,
Mm.
start acquiring customer bases in this similar area. So you've got to maintain a lot of curiosity, and also you do need to data mine, right? Data is important. You need to understand where these potential customers are. Can you expand into contemporary if you're not really a contemporary brand, for example, or can you expand your product line into a completely different world? If you're making one thing and you've got an opportunity to make something else, do they blend together? They don't necessarily have to, right? If you can acquire a different customer base and you have an opportunity for an in that regard, right? So
Mm.
there's always a perpetual feedback loop internally, and there's a perpetual feedback loop with your customers
Mm.
or your potential customers. And so I think that it's really, really important to be discovering and in a place of curiosity around where your opportunities are. I think it's important not to just design on a whim, not to have creativity on a whim. Oh, I want to make dresses all of a sudden. Well, there's so much competition. Why would you do that? I want to make phone cases, but there's a zillion competition, right? There's a zillion people doing that. So you want to think about your business model in terms of also creatively, also what is it that you can develop into that is not already widely owned by other businesses, where they already have a sort of monopoly on it, on search or on in these various marketing platforms, right? So
Mm.
you want to be able to figure out where is the next move for yourself based on some information. You know what I mean?
And you said a couple of things that I want to jump into. Data mining, I understand, but can you explain a little bit on this perpetual feedback loop with yourself? What do you exactly mean by that?
Well, a perpetual feedback loop internally. So, at least for me, I have my own systems, right? So, I'm going, okay, I've been in creativity for a while. I can tell that I need to go back into operations mode. So I do a lot of things that will put me into creativity. So I like to play music. I like to do clay. I like to do things that will automatically set that hemisphere of my brain
Mm,
into gear. And a lot of
got
people
it.
have trouble going in from one or the other.
Got
Right.
it.
So if you're a creative person, you might have trouble launching into operational mode. So you need to set systems in place that will help you get there more quickly and easily. Everybody has that capacity. So on an individual level, we need to be balancing ourselves that way. You might notice that you're more creative at night, but you're more structured in the day. Like after you go to the gym or whatever it is, keeps you in a let's get some shit done and it's more of a business minded situation. And then maybe towards the evening, you have more creativity. So that might be when you want to skew into your workload that is going to be more creative. So
Got it.
you want to be oscillating between these two worlds on an individual level. And then you want a feedback loop between you and your customer base, between you and your staff that's giving you information, on how to operate your company and where it's lacking creatively and where it's lacking operationally. This is all part of the feedback of information. You
Got
know
it.
what I mean? That you're
Yeah.
getting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So I sort of picked up self-awareness and intentionality around that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
In terms of system, that's an interesting question. I want to ask you about that because I was asked about this morning with a client, and she's a creative, and
Hmm.
she's in her true zone of genius is sort of being in creative, clay
Yeah.
work, artwork, painting, those things.
Hmm.
But one of the things she's really struggling with right now is she's very, very hyper disorganized, and she's sort of chasing squirrels all the time. And,
Yeah.
and and I asked her about her systems. I'm like, what sort of structure do you have in place to sort of manage your own self? And she's like, I can't. I just get overwhelmed by systems. I just can't get over it. So I was like, well, how do you track your customers? She's like, well, I pull up my notebook, and I was like, she has no systems whatsoever. And so
Mm.
it's interesting because at the same time, systems, well, they're very critical to running your business, right? Whether it's a CRM, whether it's some sort of structure managing your business, like being able to track data, all those sorts of things. She was concerned that they were going to affect and impact her creativity. And
Hmm.
there's a fine line between having being able to sort of incorporate both in your business. Being
Hmm.
a creative man like you are, how have you been able to integrate systems into your business and what value? I'm just sort of asking you to sort of validate what I'm
Hmm.
saying here. What value do they bring you? But also, how do you sort of maintain that rub between still being creative but also utilizing a system?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I have two thoughts there. One is sometimes one of the greatest things we can do is learn how to work with ourselves.
Mm,
I would say that's a probably high on the priority list if you're an entrepreneur. You want to figure that out. And everyone works differently. So again, discernment on the information you're getting from other people on how to live your life,
mm,
right? How to do operations. Well, some people are completely different to me, and I could never do the model that they have. They do emails at 8 p.m. till 10 p.m. They're very on it then. But then the day is completely more loose and creative. Like everyone has a different way of structuring things. And I think that arguably, I would say giving yourself structure is actually the most powerful way to be more creative. And the thing is that when you again, we're not talking about artistry here because that's a completely different discussion. Creativity it has a purpose of generating revenue,
mhm,
usually,
mhm,
right? Whether you're trying to sell clay pots or whether it doesn't really matter, right? Creativity for the sake of something, for the sake of a
mhm,
purpose like that, needs framework and structure. And I liken the structure to almost like where you're aiming your system, where you're aiming your creativity. Where are you
mm,
aiming it, right? You're aiming it. Are you aiming it all over the place? You're aiming it to the left and to the right, to the up, then right. You want to be able to take that and say, okay, I'm aiming my creativity in this direction, and I've got a feedback loop set up, and I know that based on there's a reason I'm aiming it this way. That's the operational side saying, hey, we're going to focus on clay bowls because the last 10 people who came in, they only bought bowls, or 80% of what I sell is bowls, or whatever. So I'm going to focus more on that. I'm going to do colorways. I'm going to do more. So I'm going to aim my creativity. I'm going to make different types of bowls. I'm going to do so. It's it's creativity is best, and when you're talking about entrepreneurs, creativity is best executed within a framework of that is operational, right?
yeah.
Operations support the creativity.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I told her, just simply thinking of it this way, if you walk into a cluttered space, imagine that's your mind. If you were to organize that a little bit more, even if it's just organizing your paintbrushes and your paints and sort of having an inventory of what you need and what you need to reorder because you're
Hmm.
always running out of paint, imagine how much more creative you could be so you could focus on the actual painting if you had all of a
Yes.
system that was supporting
Yes.
everything that you were doing, right? So
Yeah.
the analogy I gave her is like, just imagine cleaning up your room or cleaning up your office, and that's your mind. If you can clean that up
Hmm.
and get some of those things out of your head, you're not going to have to always have to deal with them in a
Hmm.
reactive state, right? So that
Hmm.
seemed to resonate with her, and it's interesting. A lot of
Yeah.
creatives you meet sort of struggle with that, and I always wondered why. I've been blessed, it's not to be vain, but I've been blessed with a good balance of left and right. So I
Hmm.
sort of always have been very organized but hyper creative. And one of the
Hmm.
things that's helped me do that is to sort of put systems in place, rubrics that can kind of
Hmm.
stack upon themselves over time. And for me,
Yeah.
like building a business is very similar to that, right? Like building things that help you build more things, right?
Yeah. 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 And I think again that the greatest issue, we go into psychology and business a lot. At least I do, and when I write, because I think it's really important to understand the psychology behind
Mm,
high functioning entrepreneurship. I do think that you can try a human being. My godmom once told me, she said a human being can get used to anything, right? And I was like, what, that's so fascinating. You can get used to really poor living conditions. You can get used to really luxurious living conditions. You can get used to hard work. You can get used to working out every day. You can get worse. You can get used to drinking green juice every day. It happens to people all the time. So
mhm,
the question again is, where are you focusing your effort, and how do you need to prioritize what's going to be the most bang for your buck right now. Maybe that is has nothing to do with your career or your work or your creativity, and maybe it has to do with bringing more balance into your life. And if
mhm,
something is out of balance, I mean, as we talked about Lao Tzu before and the Tao Te Ching, life is always going to try to pull you into balance. I mean, that is what is happening. Whether some people have a different way of looking at it, but from my framework, it's the sort of greatest power that we have is to be able to walk the line between the balancing forces, to be right at the center. Now, we're not always going to be that. We're going to be pendulum swinging a little bit here and there, but you don't want to be pendulum swinging super hard,
mm,
right? Because you're disconnecting when you do that. When you go into a creativity mode, for example, and completely disconnected in operation, you don't want it to be so far flunked.
mm,
And the reason for that is because you want to maintain connection, like that tension of opposites. We want some sort of connection there perpetually. So I think when creatives are concerned about that, the question I have, that's like saying, when you go work out, is being mean to yourself um, more fruitful, not even work out, just every day when people wake up and they're mean to themselves, it's being mean to yourself more fruitful than being loving and kind to yourself. We think, oh, if I'm at the gym and I'm not telling myself go harder, you're you piece of crap, like whatever people do in their minds when they're working. Are you sure? Have you ever even tried to be more loving or to be more on the positive side?
mm.
Right? Have you even tried it? Because if you've never tried it, then you don't even know. You're just assuming based on your history and based on what you know. And often, what you don't know, what's on the other side of your success is what you don't know.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love that. Your was it you said your godmother? She was
My
alluding to
God.
this whole idea of neuroplasticity, which I've been really diving into
Yes.
lately. This idea of like cognitive abilities to normalize things, and like
Mm-hmm.
you can basically retrain your mind to do anything you want. I mean,
100%. Yeah.
so that's pretty cool. That's funny you said that about like being kind to yourself in the gym. I used to have this football coach when I was in high school, and he was the meanest motherfucker ever. But he was also the nicest guy. But on the field, he was always
Mm-hmm.
berating people, and I
Mm-hmm.
often wondered, is like I don't really feel like that motivates me. I'd rather
Yeah.
have you tell me how good I'm doing rather than tell me what a piece of shit I am.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
was always like,
Exactly.
Coach, like, come
Exactly.
on, man.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I
you would,
train a lot too, and when I tend to, I have a lot of female friends, and oftentimes we'll be working out together, and if I treated them like that, I don't think they would work out with me anymore. You know what I mean? So,
but it's funny because in the Western world, that's sort of the model that we grew up with. Like, no pain,
yes,
no gain. You have to
yep,
be like killer and blood, sweat, and tears. But that's really
yep.
not actually how our optimization model really works in theory. I mean, at least what I've been testing out.
No, I mean, listen, things need to be challenging in order for you to grow, but they don't need to be harmful. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? And I think
100%.
there's a line, and I also think, have you tried out being positive with yourself? Or have you tried setting up operational systems in place? Have you, like, these things that people tend to be afraid of are, what's on the other side of that is really what they want most, which is the
Mm,
success or the
yeah.
growth that they're looking for. And so we kind of have to face those more fearful things. And usually when you're afraid of something, it alludes to a potential reality in which you need to go towards that fear. You need to go and
100%.
do it, right?
Everything's a reflection of what's going on inside, right?
Yeah.
In terms of, we've talked a little bit about duality, and I actually love the concept. In terms of you as a business builder and as a man, and I don't know if you have any children or any what your life looks like on the
Mhm.
personal side, but where has this idea of duality and lessons, if you will, like struggles, things that you
Mhm.
failed at, where has that really shown up in your life, and how have you sort of flipped that around to learn from it to build something bigger and better from that?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, so I had a bit of a challenging childhood for me, and that the byproduct of trauma as a child tends to work into, I also notice this in entrepreneurs, especially high stressful entrepreneurship roles, or just situations in which entrepreneurs find themselves in, often can be related back to trauma and the obstacles of our youth. And
Hmm.
so I think, for me, I've definitely been out of balance, largely because of that. I think all of us are pretty much imbalanced from our youth. And as we get older, we're trying to recalibrate to a new way of being that isn't so hard on ourselves, that isn't
Hmm.
so, I definitely used to take a hammer to everything, that
Hmm.
analogy. Well, not everything needs a hammer, right? It's really difficult for me to not be on point doing this, getting my stuff done, and training and eating right and all, really sort of a framework for what has been a framework for success, but that is an aggressive, again, an out of balance, situation, a more masculine situation. Where's the opportunity for the feminine sort of elements to come into play or to exist in my life? And that's where we sort of allow things to be as they are. And we could go on this topic forever, but for me, definitely on a personal level, I mean, I struggled with an autoimmune condition. It took me 6 years to heal from. It took me 6 years to recover from, and it was very, very scary and very hard. And a lot of what I had to learn or undo was the ideas in my head that were the darker concepts, right? This sort of like, I've got to do this, or I'm not enough. If I don't do this, I'm not going to be lovable. If I don't,
Hmm.
these kind of concepts, as cheesy as they might sound, they're very much rooted in a lot of the populace, right?
Sure.
And they come from dysfunctional parents. They come from dysfunctional societies. They come from dysfunction as a whole in humanity. And we really, as a society and as a species, if we want to survive, we really need to work through those elements and regain some balance. And that was scary. Again, it was scary to let myself rest. It was scary, which is exactly what I needed. You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
was scary to not operate my life in the way that I had been operating it, because that was up until that point was what had saved me as a
Mm.
kid. That resilience is what had saved me. But as I got older, that same principle was hurting me. And I was being forced by the universe, by life, to rein it back and to learn the other half of the equation, right? And develop that muscle.
Mm.
And like you said, like we were talking earlier, I mean, we all can learn how to do. We over time we can learn. We have neuroplasticity. We can relearn anything.
Mm.
We can
Mm.
rewire the brain, and it's never too late to do that. And I spent a lot of time, and still do. I still spend I'm still practicing my relaxation, my rest, my modes of creativity and letting go. And, especially as an entrepreneur, that has served me far better to be able to have that skill set than almost any other skill set, which is being able to roll with the punches, which be able to step back and say, okay, not a big deal.
Yeah.
I've been through worse, whatever it is, like, let's go. Let's go. You know what I mean?
That really resonates with me. One of the things that I do with my clients before we start any sort of brand work or any sort of strategy is we sort of do some identity inflection work centered
Mm-hmm.
around attachment theory, just so we can
Mm.
understand like what's some of the trauma loops that we may still be
Yeah.
experiencing. Because what a mind fuck that is. You mentioned some of the stuff that we incur as children from our parents and our
Hmm.
experiences. I don't think a lot of people stop and consider that during the most formative years of our life, we're taking on someone else's identity, someone else's experiences, someone else's
Yep.
expectations, our parents, even the name we're given. It's not even, we didn't even have any choice in that name. Like you were just
Nope.
given the name Latif, and that suddenly this is who you are, right?
Well, not exactly. I chose that name 10 years ago.
Well, even better
This is a
because
long
my name,
story.
well, dude, we need to talk because I actually changed my name to what I am now because I was like, I'm not this person. Nobody
Yeah.
gave me a choice in that name.
Yeah.
So wow,
You're reclaiming your, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I
We got a
love
lot to
that.
riff on.
So my real name, my birth given name is not Devo. I changed my name to Devo because that was the name that resonated with me. It
Yep.
came from there's a whole storyline to it. But anyhow,
Yep.
to my point, not many people do that, and not many people take the time to consider the formative years of their parenting or their
Correct.
peers or their
Yeah.
professors or their teachers or their trauma and all those things, and they tend to stack, right? And if you
Hmm.
don't do the work like you're just talking about, they tend to drive everything that you do, from
They do.
how you handle your business to how you handle your partners to how you handle your clients to your employees to your
Yep.
customer service. So it's really, really important to sort of understand how you show up in the world, right? Um,
Absolutely.
but this whole idea of attachment theory, I want to talk about that for a second, and this idea of masculine and feminine energy. And you said, like being an entrepreneur is spiritual work. I love that you said that. I just wonder if we could break
Hmm.
that down for a minute
Yeah.
because I think a lot of people sort of I'm going to use the word myopic again. We sort of put everything in silos, right? I'm doing this. This is my work. I'm over here. This is my relationship. I'm over here. This is my
Hmm.
business. I'm over here. This is my
Hmm.
yard work, whatever you want to say. But all
Hmm.
of them sort of connect in a symbiotic way, right?
Hmm.
And this idea of spiritual work, just talk to me a little bit about that because I'm fascinated to hear your take on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, as an entrepreneur, you're going to be faced with a lot of challenges. And everyone has their own current method for dealing with challenges. And part of being successful as an entrepreneur is having to unlearn those because generally they don't work.
Hmm.
And to be an entrepreneur requires a great deal of plasticity. It requires a system, it requires an up leveling of your system to, instead of being like, oh, there's a problem, or I'm going to get taken for a ride on this obstacle, and oh my God, my company might fail, and then oh my God, it's doing well, and then oh my God, it's doing bad, and then oh my God, it's doing well. This is that roller coaster. There's memes on it. If you have to learn to step off the roller coaster if you want to enjoy being an entrepreneur,
Mm.
right? Because there will be stress and there will be all these things. And for me, I've almost lost my brand many times. And now, if it were to occur again, and it still might, right? This war, what's going on now, it could. I mean, fashion's in a tough spot. But the thing is that I now just enjoy learning. I enjoy the process. I enjoy the ups and downs, and I have full faith that whatever comes next, or if I need greater financial freedom or wealth, then I'll, and the Growth Operative that can't support me, and Spirithoods can't support me, whatever it is. I have faith that I'm fully capable, and I think that also comes with experience. So it's like you can't enter in entrepreneurship and say, oh, I'm going to just feel this way. It's like when people who talk about manifesting, like, oh, just, how would you feel if you're rich? You're going to be like all excited and blah, blah, blah. Well, one, that's not how rich people feel. They actually just probably feel calm and just peaceful, right? Because they know that they have some form of security. But you can't just automatically go into entrepreneurship thinking that you're going to be secure and feel peaceful. That is
Mm.
not what happens in the first 5 to 10 years. I just don't think.
Mhm.
But after that, if you're learning the lessons you're being taught, you'll see a pattern that repeats. Oh, I
Mm.
almost lost my company. And 2 years later, oh, I almost lost my company. Oh, my company's doing great. And then, oh, it's not doing great. Oh, it's doing great. Like you'll see patterns. And you'll learn that you only have so much control, right? Just like as a kid, there's always a force out there. I don't control the tariffs. That could have ended my brand. That still could. Like I don't control war. I don't control global economics. There's a lot of things that we don't control. So I think we personalize so much, and that's where we get back to attachment. And to be a successful entrepreneur, to be able to think clearly, you have to sort of detach from life's circumstances and the materiality and the things that are going on and really connect with what is truly important to you, the
Mm.
love in your life, the family, the, that joy, the happiness, the experiences that you're getting. Those are the things that we really like. And I think sometimes even now in culture, it's like people are talking about wanting to be a billionaire. I'm like, why do you, how is that at all? If you're a billionaire, you've stepped and done some crazy things and probably, in my opinion, walked on a lot of people to get up to that spot.
Mm.
Instead of sharing the wealth, you kind of hoarded it.
Mm.
So I have no desire to be that. So finding your own, what are, the pillars, like you said, we look at these things in a silo, but if my company separates me from my family and my life,
Mm.
that may not be a good type of company in
Mm.
which we might say, hey, we need to close this and do something different, right? Part of what is really important to me is teaching. And so, though I absolutely adore my fashion brand and will keep it going and love creating and love it, I actually wanted to shrink it a little bit. I wanted, so this is an opportunity right now that I'm just following what the universe is giving anyways, which is 180,000 jobs were lost in February. And of course, jobs reports change and all this. But AI is taking, jobs. There's a lot of transition right now. I don't know what the future holds, so I'm getting ahead of it. And that's again, I'm not in a state of like I need to achieve more. I'm not putting the cart before the horse. I'm trying to follow what's being given to me without saying no to obstacles. If there's an obstacle and I want to overcome it, then let's do it. Let's
Mm.
go. But for me, I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm at a point in my life where I want to start teaching more, and the universe is giving me this opportunity to sort of shrink my other brand down a little bit while the growth operative is growing. I'm going to follow that lead rather than pushing a rock up a hill. And of course, as the recession comes and then it goes away and we start to get back into a nice positive economy, Spirits will grow, and maybe I'll shift more of my time and energy into that. So
Mm.
I'm just, I think as a spiritual process, entrepreneurship is about trying to read between the lines and also not push a rock up a hill.
Mm.
It shouldn't be so hard. It's like relationships. If your marriage or your relationship is just really, really difficult, that's indicating something. Why are you still in it? Are you sure that it's the right thing? You need to examine that. Maybe that company or that product line or that thing is just, it's not the right time, or it's not the right thing for you. And
Mm.
what would it feel like to be in alignment? What is in alignment? And working hard is an absolute necessity as an entrepreneur. You're
Mm.
not going to get around that. You know what I mean? In my opinion. I mean, sure, there are some people that don't, they just they hit a couple of home runs, sure, but those are the outliers. Most people are going to learn through experience and gain experiential wisdom, and that shapes who you are as a person. And that's why I think being an entrepreneur is so powerful, because it helps shape who you are as a person.
There's a lot of existentialism in what you just sort of shared with me. And one of the things I just want to get some clarification on, you said everything is cyclical, patterns are cyclical,
Yes.
and they are, and that's just the nature of the universe. There's nothing we can do about that. But you're not saying that we can't prepare for those. You're not saying that we can't counterbalance those. You're
Yep.
simply saying that there's always going to be an ebb and a flow in everything we do, even in our
Hmm.
relationships and our even our own workout routines, or even the
Yep.
weather or whatever it is,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
You're just simply saying that those are things that are out of our control, but you're not saying we can't prepare for those and being proactive about those sorts of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rolling with the punches, right? So it's like, okay, do you really, is the body really supposed to be at 180 pounds and this fit and this body fat percentage year round?
Mm.
Absolutely not.
I can
There
speak
is
from
no,
experience that that's
right.
definitely a cycle right now.
Right. There's a cycle. There's a spring, summer, fall, winter. I
Yeah.
mean, you need that. You actually need to gain weight in winter. You need to exercise your fat mobilization. You
Mm.
literally need to do that if you want to flip all your epigenetics on and off,
Mm.
and so that your body knows how to work with stuff. Sedentary lifestyle is bad, because just like monocrops are bad, mono anything is not healthy. And so I think we sometimes assume that the cycle period where it's going down is a bad thing. And I have never actually felt that that is true whenever I've been on the other side of a downturn. I mean,
Mm.
sometimes Spirit has had huge years, really powerful years, driving, double revenue than the previous year even. Like we've had some crazy times. And then we've had down years where revenue's cut in half. I mean, I've lost tons of money at times and made tons of money at times through Spirithoods as an example. And when I look back, what would have helped more than anything is learning to flow with certain things rather than trying to maintain the status quo for the sake of my ego or for the sake of what I thought was good or bad. We really don't know until we're on the other side of it. And more often than not, preparing, I think as you go through experiences as an entrepreneur, you begin to see the cycles emerge, right? You can see when there's an economic downturn, oh, that we're sort of at the precipice of a recession. Okay, what does that mean for my business? It means maybe we don't want to buy a shit ton of inventory right now. Maybe we want to not try to grow during a recession. Maybe we want to scale a few things back just to prepare, just to be on the safe side. Better to have a company than to not. And part of doing that means don't always perpetually be trying to grow. I think that's absurd. I think it's not even cancer is the only thing that perpetually wants to grow. So it's not going to happen anyways. Even the biggest companies can't, they can't do that. Right. So I think, a lot of entrepreneurship, is again, when we get back into the spiritual components of it, it's learning the ebb and flow. It's learning when to put your foot on the gas and when to maybe brake ahead of the incoming traffic that you're seeing. Right. And preparing, it's actually very doable. It's very doable to get ahead of storms. No question.
Yeah, and a word that sort of comes to mind as you're talking, and you said it a couple of times, is this idea of alignment, and it's a bit of a buzzword. I hear it everywhere I go now. It's all over LinkedIn, and because the algorithm of AI is caught up and just sort of like amalgamating that for everybody, right? But alignment is something that is really sort of near and dear to me because it speaks to balance, right? It speaks to that centerpiece. It sort of speaks, you said the Tao Te Ching, and one of the centerpieces of everything that he's written is about this idea of alignment and flowing like water, if you will. But it's not something that's taught to us, not in business schools, not taught in your MBA programs. And most of the time when you get into corporations, because I've been there, they don't teach you about finding balance or finding liquidity or flowing like water. They're like more, build bigger, better, faster, right? So I think that model is shifting. I do think it is shifting. I think there's a lot of people that are sort of starting to see that there's a better way of doing things, right? And I'm just curious, sort of in the sense of ebbs and flows and everything is cyclical, where do you sort of see, we talked at the outset that there's probably more entrepreneurs in the history of business now kind of coming out, right? And I know that data point is true. Where do you sort of see things going right now in the scheme of everything with the world and geopolitically and like crypto and financials and all these different things that are sort of like there seems to be a lot of things that are ending and a lot of things that are burgeoning. And I'm just curious, you seem to have a really sort of large wealth of knowledge on sort of what's happening. What's your take on where things are going right now?
Yeah, I mean, that is a loaded question.
Let's hear what you have to say.
I think that, to be honest, I think we see a de-dollarization occurring. I mean, not I think, that is occurring.
It is happening, yeah.
And the question is, how long will it take before, the dollar is maybe a mixed bag, is one of many mixed reserve currencies, one of many reserve currencies on the table. I do think that's coming. I think that America is not fully prepared for the next 10 to 20 years, not from an AI standpoint. That's another topic of conversation for sure. But I think from a global economic world empire situation, the fall and rise of empires. Ray Dalio's work is instrumental in understanding that. I would highly encourage you to read his latest book. But I do think we're in for a little bit more of a challenging time. And I think that there are a lot of indicators that is the case. I can see that we're now in a bearish market in the stock market. This isn't something people have been waiting for this. Everyone's like AI bubble, blah, blah, blah. To some degree, yes, in my opinion, but to a larger degree, just we're in a recessionary period. That's what's happening. There's a lot of things going on. You have credit card debt at an all-time high, default rates at an all-time high. You have a lot of things that are, the car market is not actually doing that. A lot of people are underwater in their car loans. There's a lot of things going on. Businesses, bankruptcies are at an all-time all-time. I don't know if they're at an all-time high, but they keep climbing higher and higher every year, both personal and corporate. In the fashion industry, we saw many. Who just filed for bankruptcy? Not Nordstrom's, but one of these big chains. They just filed for bankrupt, Chapter 11 reorganization. Forever 21 went bankrupt. So there's a lot going on right now, and I don't say that to scare you. I say, look, there's opportunity here as well. And even my biggest competitor went out of business January. And I had many conversations. And I think the opportunity here as entrepreneurs is to see where we can take market share. As an example, like for me, that's one of my driving opportunities this year is they were 3 times our size. Not towards the end, not towards last year and the year before they weren't, but at their peak, they were 3 times our size. And there's also a lot of people that are aging out of their businesses. So I think AI is also another player here. And I don't know what to think about that in terms of safety. I'm not super thrilled on the guardrails there. We don't really have any. And I think that is very, very dangerous for society as a whole. We're in like the industrial revolution. I think that things will come about. My hope is that things will come about in terms of regulations. I think that AI as a tool will be useful for entrepreneurs. I think, like SaaS models used to take, how many people and how many millions of dollars to launch. You can launch one yourself practically. You can have a team of 3 people that are building a SaaS model for an enterprise or a corporation, right? Or small businesses. So there is a lot of the gates are sort of coming down in certain areas. And I think that's why entrepreneurship, and on top of that, people are maybe being laid off, and there's just a lot of changes going on. And so it does give rise to the opportunity for people to say, okay, how do I make money? How do I utilize my skills? And how do I not be sort of in the corporate world? Because a lot of people are tired of that as well, some of the models. So I do think there'll be a lot of opportunity there. But from my perspective, I think there is definitely a shift in the global world order. Obviously, you can see that, but it's going to come. There's really nothing we can do about it from my perspective. It's going to happen. And so preparing for that shift is important. And there's a lot of ways to do that, but definitely educating yourself and looking and trying to foresee a little bit into where is the direction of things going as an entrepreneur. I am concerned about my own fashion brand, just considering all of the things that have gone on, from tariffs, as we talked about, to war, to just tougher times for the everyday person, for there just being less jobs at the moment. I think we'll get through that obstacle at some point, but their AI is disrupting, the world. And I think there is a lot of opportunity. And I think right now is the best time to be planning, preparing for some of the things that are coming, both stockpiling your savings or investing in areas that feel more, safe, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, you've got to look at a lot of different things and do a little bit of research. I don't know if that, I feel like that maybe didn't help, but
No, there's no right or wrong answer to that. I think everybody has their own take on what's happening. I've got my own. It's interesting to sort of hear just sort of a forecast. I'm fascinated by the AI thing. I'm wondering, like the internet, is there a law of diminishing returns with this, where at some point, right now it's novel, right now it's creative, everybody's a genius suddenly. At some point, will the market actually catch up with that and be like, okay, enough is enough? But interesting. All right, we're at the end of our show. I want to jump into my last round, was my rapid fire hot seat.
Okay,
So
great.
I'm just going to give you either or, this or that, and just want to sort of hear your take. It's kind of fun. I sort of imagine where you're going to go with it, but just I like to do it anyway. So,
right,
do you build something big, or do you build something that actually works?
Build something that works.
Do you control everything, or do you just trust the process?
You trust the process. Well, I mean, there's a middle ground there.
Not for this, not for the hot seat. There isn't. You get either or.
You're gonna have to trust the process. There's no way. Yeah, there's no way.
Do you stay creative, or do you build structure?
I think you got to stay creative.
I agree. Do you be right, or do you get the result?
You get the result.
Do you hold the vision, or do you adapt the vision?
Adapt the vision constantly.
Move fast or move intentionally?
Move intentionally. Moving fast is a recipe for disaster in a lot of cases. Not always, but in a lot of cases.
Listen to yourself or listen to the market?
Well, listen to yourself for sure.
Push harder or pull back? I'm not giving you time for any breakdown.
I know. Pull back.
Do you stay attached or do you let it go? Hot seat, baby.
Trust, man. Let it go. Let it go. Let it go. We'll let it go.
Do you lead with instinct or do you lead with data?
Data.
And Kat makes her parents for the
Yeah,
cameo here. I appreciate it.
yeah.
Man, this is a great conversation. I knew it would be. I really appreciate you coming on the lab today and just kind of sharing your zone of genius with me and just your insights. We dropped a lot of things and covered a lot of topics. So thank you very
Yeah,
much,
hey, I
brother.
appreciate you. Great questions. It was so fun. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, man. What's the best way if people wanted to connect with you? What's the best way to find you, your teas, your work, all the things? What's the best way?
Yeah, I mean, growthoperative.com. That's my consultancy, spirithoods.com if you like fashion. And then I have a Substack that I just launched this year that's been pretty fun. And I write about uh, all types of things that we just talked about, from psychology of entrepreneurship to actual how to do A, B, and C. So, and that's just Latif Hamilton at Latif Hamilton on Substack.
You are like the third or fourth person who has dropped Substack to me and asking me why I'm not using it. I got to check it out. So thank you again. I think this is the universe giving me a nod saying you got to get in there. So
Yeah, it's
good
fun. I like
information.
it. I
Yeah.
think it's a little more serious, It's not the stereotypical Instagram sort of model. So,
Well, that's actually how I'm using LinkedIn. And I've had a few people who don't appreciate me using LinkedIn in that capacity. I write very candidly, very raw stuff that I put out there.
yeah.
And I actually had somebody take the time, which I just really don't understand, but I appreciate it. It means that I'm doing something right.
Yeah.
He said
Yep.
that I was bastardizing the LinkedIn model by sharing all of the information that I'm sharing. And I was like, interesting take. I really appreciate your perspective on this.
Well, maybe you should keep doing it then because
I heartily disagree, but thank you for your point of view. So,
Yep,
anyhow,
yep.
all the
That's
information
cool.
you just shared with me will be in the show notes. And then we'll sort of like, I'll do a recap later, just sort of after I get off the podcast with you. But thanks again, man. I really
Perfect.
appreciate it.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, man. All right.
All right, that's it for today, folks. Thank you. If this episode hit you, like it, subscribe it, leave a review. It helps a lot more than you think, and it helps the right people find this show and help us keep growing so we can continue to produce amazing episodes. You can find me at thebrandstoryteller.com if you're interested in connecting with me, and everything else about this episode, the guest, the websites, the social media handles, they are all linked below. I'll see you in the next show.